Welcome. You're here because you cannot sleep, or because you find ancient history deeply uninteresting, or possibly both. Either way, you have made an excellent choice. My name is not important. What is important is that I will be telling you facts about ancient civilizations. They are all true. Most of them will not change your life in any meaningful way. Get comfortable. We will begin with ancient Egypt, because everyone begins with ancient Egypt. It is the polite thing to do. The ancient Egyptians existed for roughly 3,000 years. To put that into perspective, more time passed between Cleopatra and the building of the Great Pyramid than between Cleopatra and us, sitting here right now. Take a moment with that. Or don't. It's fine either way. The pyramids were not built by slaves. This is something most people get wrong. They were built by paid workers, skilled laborers who received wages, health care, and a food allowance that included beer. Ancient Egyptian workers actually went on strike once because their beer rations were late. This is the oldest recorded labor strike in human history. It was about beer. The ancient Egyptians had over 2,000 gods. 2,000. At some point, someone sat down and thought, we need another one. And then they invented a god for the exact moment the sun rises, but before it has fully cleared the horizon. That god's name was Khepri, and he had the head of a scarab beetle. Nobody questioned this. Cats were considered sacred in ancient Egypt. Killing a cat, even accidentally, was punishable by death. When a household cat died, the entire family would shave off their eyebrows as a sign of mourning. They would continue to be sad until their eyebrows grew back, at which point the mourning period was considered officially over. This is perhaps the most Egyptian thing that has ever happened. The ancient Egyptians also invented toothpaste. Their recipe included crushed eggshell, pumice, ox hooves, and burnt myrrh. It almost certainly did not taste good. They also invented breath mints, which they made from honey, cinnamon, and myrrh, possibly to compensate for the toothpaste. Cleopatra was not Egyptian. She was Greek, descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. She was also the first ruler of her entire dynasty to actually bother learning the Egyptian language. The previous rulers had governed Egypt for 250 years without speaking a single word of it. Take a breath. We are going to move on now. Ancient Mesopotamia. We are now in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, and which most historians agree is where human civilization technically began. You are welcome, Iraq. The Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia around 5,000 years ago, invented writing. They did not invent it to record poetry or philosophy or important historical events. They invented it to keep track of beer and grain deliveries. The oldest written records in human history are essentially receipts. Nothing has changed. The Sumerians also invented the wheel, the calendar, and the concept of time being divided into 60 seconds and 60 minutes. The reason we have 60 seconds in a minute is because the Sumerians used a base 60 number system. Nobody has ever fully explained why they chose 60. But here we are, 5,000 years later, still using it. Your alarm clock is a Sumerian invention. Think about that the next time it goes off. The ancient city of Babylon had a population of over 200,000 people at its peak, making it the largest city in the world for much of its history. It had paved roads, a sewage system, and a postal service. It also had the Hanging Gardens, which were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though there is no archaeological evidence they actually existed, historians believe they were real. They are just not entirely sure where they were, what they looked like, or who built them. Other than that, very well documented. King Hammurabi of Babylon created one of the first written legal codes around 1754 BC. It contained 282 laws, covering everything from wages and trade to marriage and criminal justice. One of the laws stated that if a builder built a house that collapsed and killed the owner, the builder would be put to death. If the collapse killed the owner's son, the builder's son would be put to death. Ancient Mesopotamian law had very strong opinions about accountability. The Assyrians, another Mesopotamian civilization, kept extensive royal libraries. King Ashurbanipal of Assyria collected over 30,000 clay tablets in his library at Nineveh, making it one of the oldest libraries in the world. Most of the tablets were about religion, astronomy, and medicine. Some of them were about how to interpret dreams. The ancient world had a lot of thoughts about dreams. You are doing very well. Your eyes may be getting heavy. Ancient Greece. We move now to ancient Greece, which you have definitely heard of, because Western civilization has not stopped talking about ancient Greece for approximately 2,000 years. The ancient Greeks did not call their country Greece. They called it Hellas, and they called themselves Hellenes. The word Greece comes from the Latin word Krytia, which is what the Romans called them. The Greeks have been living in a country with the wrong name for over 2,000 years and seem to have mostly made peace with it. The Olympic Games began in ancient Greece in 776 BC. They were held every 4 years in Olympia in honor of the god Zeus. Athletes competed in events including running, wrestling, discus throwing, and chariot racing. They competed completely naked. This was considered normal. Married women were not allowed to watch, but unmarried women were permitted to attend. The reasoning behind this distinction has been lost to history. Socrates, one of the most famous philosophers in human history, never wrote anything down. Everything we know about what he said and thought comes from his students, primarily Plato, who wrote it all down for him. Socrates spent his entire life asking people difficult questions and making them uncomfortable at dinner parties. He was eventually put on trial for corrupting the youth of Athens and sentenced to death by drinking hemlock. He accepted this calmly and spent his final hours discussing the nature of the soul with his friends. This was very on brand for Socrates. The ancient Greeks believed that the liver, not the heart, was the seat of human emotion. When they wanted to express deep feeling, they referenced the liver. Love poems in ancient Greece were essentially liver poems. This did not catch on. Alexander the Great was technically Macedonian, not Greek, though he was tutored by Aristotle and considered himself deeply Greek in culture. He conquered most of the known world by the age of 30. He named over 20 cities after himself. He also named one city after his horse, Bucephalus. The horse got a city. Most of us will not get a city. Breathe. Settle in. We are about halfway through ancient Rome, ancient Rome. You have seen the films. The reality was both more impressive and significantly more boring. Rome was not built in a day. This is a well-known saying. What is less well-known is how long it actually took. Historians estimate the city of Rome took several centuries to reach its full size and power. The saying exists because someone felt they needed to explain this to people who were apparently expecting faster results. The Romans had a god for almost everything, much like the Egyptians, though they borrowed most of their gods from the Greeks and simply gave them new names. Zeus became Jupiter, Poseidon became Neptune, Ares became Mars. The Romans were extremely efficient. Even when it came to religion, Julius Caesar was not actually an emperor. He was a dictator, which in Roman terms was a specific temporary political role given during times of crisis. He was assassinated on the Ides of March, which is the 15th of March, in 44 BC. He was stabbed 23 times by a group of senators who were concerned about his growing power. A doctor later examined his body and concluded that only one of the 23 stab wounds was actually fatal. The other 22 were, in medical terms, unnecessary. The Romans built roads so well that many of them still exist today. They had a network of over 400,000 kilometers of roads at the height of the empire. They built them straight wherever possible, because straight roads were faster and easier to march armies along. Roman engineers would occasionally build a road directly through a hill rather than around it, because going around was considered inefficient. This attitude built an empire. Roman emperors had a notoriously short life expectancy. Of the first 30 Roman emperors, the majority did not die of natural causes. They were assassinated, executed, or driven to suicide. Being emperor of Rome was one of the most powerful positions in the ancient world, and also, statistically, one of the most dangerous jobs a person could have. The Romans invented concrete. Their concrete was so good that structures built 2,000 years ago are still standing today, while modern concrete buildings from the 20th century are already crumbling. Scientists have spent decades trying to figure out exactly how Roman concrete worked. They eventually discovered it actually gets stronger when exposed to seawater, which is the opposite of how modern concrete behaves. The Romans figured this out accidentally and did not leave notes. Ancient China. We close tonight in ancient China, which was building advanced civilizations, while most of the rest of the world was still working things out. The Great Wall of China took over 2,000 years to build across multiple dynasties. It is not actually visible from space with the naked eye, despite what you may have been told in school. An astronaut confirmed this in 2003. The wall is long but not particularly wide, and human eyes cannot resolve it from that distance. The myth persists regardless. The Chinese invented paper, printing, gunpowder, and the compass. These 4 inventions are sometimes called the 4 great inventions of ancient China, and between them, they fundamentally changed the entire course of human history. Paper allowed knowledge to be recorded and shared. Printing allowed it to be mass-produced. The compass allowed navigation across oceans. Gunpowder changed warfare forever. China invented all 4 of these things before Europe had fully figured out indoor plumbing. The terracotta army was built to guard the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, who died in 210 BC. The army consists of over 8,000 individual clay soldiers, each with a unique face, along with horses, chariots, and weapons. The entire thing was buried underground and forgotten about for over 2,000 years, until a group of farmers accidentally discovered it in 1974 while digging a well. The farmers were looking for water. They found an army instead. Emperor Qin Shi Huang was so afraid of death that he spent much of his reign searching for the elixir of immortality. He sent thousands of people on expeditions to find it. He took pills containing mercury because his advisors told him it would extend his life. The mercury almost certainly contributed to his death at age 49. He was killed, in part, by his attempt to live forever. Ancient China also invented ice cream, roughly 2,000 years before it appeared in Europe. It was made from frozen milk and rice, packed in snow. The Emperor Tang of Shang reportedly had 94 icemen, whose entire job was to keep his supply of frozen desserts stocked. 94 people, full-time, just managing the ice cream. This may be the most relatable thing any ancient emperor has ever done. And that is where we will leave things tonight. You have traveled through ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, and China without leaving your bed. You have learned things that are true and will be true tomorrow and the day after that, and for as long as anyone bothers to remember them. The ancient world was a long time ago. The people in it lived and argued and built things and made laws about beer and named cities after their horses. And now they are gone, and their civilizations are gone, and the only thing left is the facts, sitting quietly in history books, waiting for someone who cannot sleep. Good night. The ancient world will be here tomorrow if you need it.